Thanks to Atari's Recharged series, we've taken a nostalgia-fueled joyride through some of the company's most popular arcade games. From Asteroids to Centipede to Breakout, these were coin-op classics that got a brand new facelift thanks to Atari. But what about the console games? What are the recharged versions of titles best known for being on the Atari 2600? If you're one of those people who've been asking that question, then let me introduce you to Yars Recharged, an action-packed reboot of Howard Scott Warshaw's iconic console game Yars Revenge. This modern-day shake-up takes the classic formula and reimagines it as a bullet-hell dual-stick shooter. Toss in a bunch of challenge missions and exciting two-player action, and you have the makings of a must-own shoot-'em-up. But is Yars the best the Recharge series has to offer? Well, let's go ahead and find out. When it was first released in 1982, critics weren't exactly sure what to make of Yars Revenge. On one hand, it was a straightforward shooter where the goal was to shoot or nibble your way through a barrier in order to defeat the boss, the evil Quotile. However, the revenge plan also had a second step, which involved an insect-like creature named Yar taking the pieces of the barrier back to the Zorlon cannon, a powerful weapon that is surprisingly good at destroying the Quotile. This added complexity was enough to help Yars Revenge stand out on the Atari 2600, which ultimately led to a number of remakes and re-releases, as well as a 2005 sequel called Yars Return. Now comes the first Yars game in 17 years, and it looks and plays better than ever. It's a reimagined take on the classic that really ups the ante with the kind of intense action and inventive level designs that simply weren't possible back in 1982. Couple that with a whole bunch of familiar power-ups and you have a retro shooter that still manages to feel fresh and exciting. Now, although the graphics have greatly improved over the last 40 years, the core structure remains largely the same. Yar is still tasked with destroying the barriers that make the Quotile boss hard to get to. You'll do this by either shooting at the barrier or nibbling away at it, all while dodging the enemy fire coming from all the different turrets that are scattered throughout the barrier. As you destroy the force field and enemies, you'll slowly fill up a yellow gauge that'll open up the Zorlon cannon, the most powerful weapon in the entire game. You're going to want to use this to finish off the boss, which will then open up a brand new level with a completely different design. Now, a typical level will have the evil Quotile hiding in the far right of the screen, behind multiple enemies and all kinds of barriers. This is a lot of fun because you can tackle these types of stages in a bunch of different ways, giving you a lot more freedom than you normally get from a single-screen shoot-'em-up. However, don't get too comfortable with the wide-open levels because you're going to need to fight through a bunch of maze-like levels with narrow corridors and enemies that are waiting for you every single step of the way. These are especially hard because the Quotile will constantly be shooting its powerful beam at you, and just one hit from that blast will kill our insect hero in a single strike. Like all of the Recharged games, Yars is split between an arcade mode and a challenge mode. The arcade mode is basically a carbon copy of what we got with Gravatar, where we're able to customize the experience by adding handicaps that'll give you a score multiplier at the expense of making the game a little bit harder. No matter how you customize your experience, though, you'll still need to fight through level after level, furiously racking up the points by defeating the boss and then moving on to the next stage. Now, if you've been following my Recharged reviews, then you already know that it's the challenged mode, not the arcade mode, that is typically worth the price of admission. It's here where the game can get a little crazy and shake up the objectives. The good news is that Yars Recharge still has a fun challenge mode that'll take some time to complete. The problem is that there's no variety here. In past games, the goal was to destroy a certain amount of enemies, use a specific power-up, or maybe even beat a listed high score. These missions would force you to play games like Centipede and Asteroids in different ways, making it a real highlight of each and every Recharged game. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of variety when it comes to Yars. Instead of giving you different objectives to complete, the goal of each challenge level is identical. Kill the quotile. That's it. This mode is nothing more than an excuse to throw the player into a bunch of challenging and occasionally frustrating level designs. Look, don't get me wrong, I love battling through these stages, but without the variety, this challenge mode is almost indistinguishable from the arcade mode. That's a real shame because there's a lot more that you can do with this concept than just give us new formations to shoot at. My other complaint is that the game is either way too easy or far too tough, with very, very little middle ground. Both in the arcade and challenge stages, I was surprised by how easy it was to beat most of the levels on the first try. And then, out of the blue, you'll suddenly get 2 or 3 especially tough stages in a row that'll trap you in a tight corridor or just make it hard to get around. It's especially frustrating when some of these overly complicated stages will take several minutes to work through, since you'll need to disarm all the enemies on the way through the maze. Dying at the very end of these grueling stages and then having to start all the way over from the beginning just isn't that much fun. And it feels like there needed to be a better ramp up in difficulty between being too easy and too hard. That said, Yars Recharged is still worth putting up with the occasional frustrating levels. While a bit on the repetitive side, the core structure is a lot of fun, and making this a dual-stick shooter was a stroke of genius. This really allowed the developer to come up with a wide assortment of crazy stage designs that would never have been possible on the Atari 2600. This is one of those classic games that desperately needed a good shakeup, and fans of the original will fall in love all over again with Yars Recharged. "40 years after first hitting the Atari 2600, that vengeful insect is back in Yars Recharged, an action-packed update to the console classic. This nostalgia-fueled action game updates the series with improved graphics, multiplayer modes, tons of missions to take on, and a lot more. Sure, it suffers from some serious difficulty spikes, as well as the problems that have always plagued the Recharged games, including the samey backgrounds and some serious lack of options. But the shoot-'em-up thrills are exciting, and much like the original, Yars Recharged doesn't feel like any other game on the market. This is one of Atari's best Recharged games yet. Hey, thanks for watching our review. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new reviews and features almost every day. Now, here's the question I have for you. What is the best revenge game ever made? Boy, that's one of the most popular themes in video games, so I suspect you're not going to have any problem thinking of a revenge story. I can't wait to see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we're back! I'll get into more of that a little bit later this week, but I got real busy with some freelance work, and then I decided to take a week off just to take a nice vacation, you know. But we're back, and I'm fully recharged, just like Yars. We're going to be diving back into a bunch of reviews, followed by the debut of diehard game fans' best and worst. If that sounds good to you, then I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,